This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Anyone, any questions, guys, before we can get started? Anyone, anything from yesterday's session? Do you have a question? Sorry. I'm sorry. Developers in a waterfall method. Mm-hmm. When they develop the code to support all the OSs, they will. But still, your code will take the underlying flavor of a particular operating system. Yes, it will take the flavor of your operating system audio, which will impact the configuration to code in a let's say in a very different way out there. It will also impact your testing if you are developing a code on one platform, testing it on the other. It will impact the development. It will impact the testing. It will do a lot of things for which we want to take all the code, meaning development, testing, and etc., on a common platform. On a common platform and make sure it is, let's say, seamless. It is time bound. If it is effective, that's where DevOps actually comes into picture out there. Yes, any more questions here? All right, so we discussed a couple of things yesterday that there is something known as a repo or repository where it's a place where you can store the code. So I'll say repos. So place where you can store the code. Let's continue from there. Storage of code. And then you have something like boards to help you plan something. So let's do DevOps out here. Images. This is the symbol of something known as boards, which will help you something like to plan your job accordingly, plan your, let's say, roles accordingly, and etc. And then you have pipelines, CI and CD pipelines, to do deployments or to do build and deployments. It's both build and release. So build and deployments out here. I'll say this is in short, build and release out here. So all these things, all these services, they're individual services. So earlier, what we used to do before Azure DevOps came into picture. Now Azure DevOps came in around 2010, 2011, something like that. Now when Azure DevOps came in, we used to call it as VSO, Visual Studio Online. We used to call it as VSO. That's the first name that it got. Very limited functionality. After in 2012, I think it got rebranded into something called VSTS, Visual Studio Steam Server. That's the reason a lot of people, even today, if you go into an organization, right, they'll still say, "Do you know VSTS?" Like VSTS or Azure DevOps is one and the same. And then later in 2014, it got rebranded to something called Azure DevOps. A lot of people also call it as ADO, in short, Azure DevOps. So ADO DevOps is something like that. So before Azure DevOps came into picture, for repository, we were relying upon something like Git or GitHub. GitHub Enterprise. You had a lot of things out here. So I'm just comparing the open source of it. The equivalent of this was Git or is Git. And Git is again a product which is now purchased by Microsoft. Like of late, Microsoft purchased this particular product called Git. Both Azure Repos and Git and one are the same. Git is nothing but an underlying software on which, let's say, you can store your code and all that stuff. So both GitHub and Azure Repos, they both run on an underlying software called Git. So even if you go ahead with a class of Azure repository or GitHub, one and the same. They are literally one and the same out here. Boards, earlier we had something, a tool called Jira. Even today we do have Jira out here, which will help you, let's say, plan and all that stuff. So what you had to do is that you had to put your code into a repository like GitHub, then integrate it with something like Jira. Again, two different integrations out here. And after that, for CI and CD, you were doing something like Jenkins. I don't have the image for that one. I'll just put this here, like Jenkins or Nevercode or Buddy Build. You have a lot of things out here. You now have something called Agro CI and something like that. So a lot of things are now, or a lot of tools are now coming in. So you have a lot of things out here in the market. So what you have to now do is that you will have to figure out a way to integrate your GitHub with Jira and then Jira with, let's say, Jenkins. make sure that they're everything, let's say, integrated together. And finally, for release, you again were using tools like Octopus is a release tool, or Jenkins by using something called GUI scripting. You had to do some scripting and etc. for Jenkins. But what I mean to say here is that in case you have an issue with Git, you had a different teams to support. In case you had an issue with Jira, you had a different team to support. In case you had an issue with Jenkins or Nevercode or BuddyBuild, then you'll have to go to, let's say, different teams out there. So what used to happen is that we used to do a lot of, let's say, waste a lot of time by doing ups and downs. Meaning, I used to go to Git and tell them that, you know what, the code is not getting built. I understand that the issue is yours. Git will say, you know what, this is not our issue. Please go and talk to the support team of Jira. I used to go to them. Then we used to talk to them telling that, you know what, we have this issue. They used to say, no, this is not our issue, go to Jenkins. If I go to Jenkins and say, you know what, this is the issue, they'll say, no, it Git. So it's a lot of, let's say, things to go up and down out here. And there isn't any proper SLA for each and every tool, service level agreement, that your issue will get resolved in this particular time period. There is no guarantee, because each and every tool had a different SLA. Some of the tools that you see here are open source, like Jenkins. You don't even have to buy a license for Jenkins. Jenkins, of course, has a community edition right now, but we do not even need to buy a license out there. So what we used to do is that when we get an issue with Jenkins, we had to go inside Jenkins. We had to, let's say, do a lot of Google search, understand a lot of forums, understand if there are any issues and etc. Post our issues, see if there's someone who replies and all that stuff. So it is very difficult to do all these integrations. Then for configuration management, of course, you had to, let's say, do something like Puppet, Chef, and all that stuff. But what Azure DevOps did is that Azure DevOps, when it came into the market, see, Azure DevOps is a product which came very late into the market. 2010 is something like that. Before that, there was already DevOps was already good in boom. Like in the US, DevOps was already good in boom, and all these tools were already in the market. What Microsoft did is that Microsoft said, okay, fine. Why do you have to go to so many places to get your issue resolved? Why don't I get all these services into one place? That's what they did. They just put all the services into one place, so that if you have a issue with the repository, don't go anywhere. Come to Microsoft, raise a ticket, will resolve. Have an issue with the board, come to Microsoft. Have an issue with the pipeline, come to Microsoft. Have an issue with the release, come to Microsoft. If you feel that the issue is not with repository, the ticket will simply be, rerouted to another team, telling that, okay, fine, this is the issue and this is what the rerouting is and all the stuff. It's the same company, same SLA. You are now sticking to a particular timeline out here. And also, I don't have to bang my head to, let's say, go ahead, integrate, let's say, Git with Jira, or Jira with Jenkins, and Jenkins with Octopus. If I had to do that, the knowledge level is also, let's say, completely different out there. But what Azure DevOps did is that they said, we'll bring everything to one place, everything to one common portal. You don't have to really go anywhere, and all these services were integrated together into one common portal called dev.azure.com. The icon of which looks something like this. Let's say if I put in DevOps, this is Azure DevOps. This is the icon, what it looks like. So dev.azure.com. So what they said is that I'll put everything in one common place. Buy a single license. You don't have to go here and there. If you get any issue, it is my responsibility. And this is a software as a service. It's not an infrastructure as a service or a platform as a service. Software as a service. You don't have to install any software, nothing. Just go into dev.azure.com. You just start your journey by, okay, not this one. You just start your journey by going into something called dev.azure.com out here. Selling start free with GitHub, meaning if you have an account already with GitHub, you can integrate with this one. Or if you already have an account, you can sign in with Azure, or you don't have, you can just say start free. And once you say start free, it's going to ask you which account you need, and I'll just, let's say, use an account. Again, in the morning, I created a new Outlook account. I just wanted to, give a demo on how to, let's say, create Azure DevOps out here. So I have a new Outlook account, which is completely different from my Azure portal. My Azure portal is classes Azure DevOps at gmail.com. This is a different account altogether. I'll just copy this out, paste this. So all you need is a Gmail or an Outlook, same like the way you had, let's say, with Azure, right? You either need to start with an Outlook or a Gmail or something like that. Say next out here. Should it be different from Azure? Not really. I'm putting a different reason being I already have a DevOps account with my portal. So that's the reason I'm not doing that. You can use the same account, not a problem. You can use the same different anything that suits you. Then it's asking me to enter the password. I'll just go ahead and enter the password out here. Say signed in. I'll say no. Not required. No credit card, nothing. It's a free account. Just go ahead, create, and you're good. And it's now telling get started with Azure DevOps. I'll say okay, fine. Country region. I'll just go ahead and select India. It's now asking me what is the name of an organization you want to create in Azure DevOps. The very first thing, see, when you create an Azure account, the very first thing that you get is a tenant. Organization in Azure DevOps is like tenant in your Azure portal. Just comparing things around. So it's now telling what is the name of the organization. Here, you can give any name. Let's say you can say sample organization or something like that. Something, the name should be unique. The name of your organization, sorry, the name of your organization should be unique. And it's telling we'll host your projects in South India. I'm okay with it. I'll say, okay, fine, not a problem. The location is okay. Then it's asking you for this one, this challenge and all that stuff. So it's in case sensitive. So please be a little careful here while going ahead and doing this out. And now it is telling me that I'm taking you to your DevOps organization out here as such. Again, we'll take a few seconds of time to register you, sign you up out here. And once it's done, it will now take you to something called as Azure DevOps organization out here. This is the URL for your DevOps organization. dev.azure.com / the name of the organization that you created. And in the left hand side, you will see the name of the organization that you started creating out here, which is sample organization 007. Again, just like with Azure, we firstly had a tenant and then we had a subscription under the tenant to start using the services. In the same way, in Azure DevOps, you firstly need to have an organization, and then in order to start using all these services, you need to create something called as a project. Project is like subscription in Azure or in the Azure portal out here. Once you create a project, all these services will be open to you. So how do you create a project? Very simple. Come back into your Azure DevOps. It's telling, you know what, you do not have a project. Do you want to get started? I'll say this is a demo project. I have a project right now. It's telling the project is public or private. Public meaning it's a public project. Anyone can just come here and see your project out here. Organizations generally don't go for public. They go for something called private projects. And I'll say create a project out here. That's it. This is the only thing that I need to do. I didn't need a credit card. I didn't need nothing. I just went and created a project. And I am now good to start my journey with Azure DevOps out here as such. So this is what I need to do. I need to create the organization of Azure DevOps. I need to have a project inside Azure DevOps. Again, you can have the same account as Azure is, or if you have a different, let's say, account, let's say the account that you're using right now is getting expired. You want to use a different account for Azure DevOps. You can use a different account for Azure DevOps. Is there any expiry for this? No, there is no expiry. Azure DevOps by default comes with a basic licensing. No, no expiration at all. No expiration at all. You can start using this one-stop solution. You can start working on this directly out here as such. Is any questions still here that I can take? Again, once you go inside the Azure, let's say DevOps, right? These were the services that I was talking about. Boards, repos, pipelines, test plans, artifacts. You have a couple of things out here. All these services gets exposed. Again, you don't have to, let's say, register each and every individual service. You can start, let's say, working on these services. Any service gets, let's say, open to you directly out here as such. You don't have to register, don't have to do anything as such, nothing. You can start working with this directly out here as such. Is any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here?
How can raise the tickets?
I'm sorry, can you come again, please?
How you can raise the tickets here?
How you can raise a ticket here? You don't have to raise a ticket from here. You do not have an option to raise a ticket from here. You'll have to come to your portal to raise a ticket. You'll have to just come here into your portal, say support request, helpless support. You'll have to say support plans, or let's say you'll have to do OU. Let's create a support request. And in this support request, I'll say this is Azure. I'll say issue type is technical, and it's telling subscription is this one. I'll say yes, next. And it's now telling what is my service. I'll say all services. I'll say DevOps, Azure DevOps services. And then I can tell what is my problem type. I can tell what is my organization link and all these things. And I can raise my ticket out here. So you do not have to, or you do not have an option to directly raise a ticket on the DevOps portal. You will have to, let's say, rely upon the portal to raise a ticket out here as such.
So DevOps only for storage purpose only.
DevOps only for storage purpose. Do you think it's only for storage purpose? Not really. You have all these services. Is this service only for storage? No. It's build, release, and a lot of things like monitoring and all that stuff. Not storage. If it's only storage, then I could have just gone into a storage account and stored everything, right? I'm not doing that. DevOps is not just it's not just a storage purpose. It's one-stop solution for all your CI/CD and all that stuff. Release is nothing but deployment. Your question was, so does it mean that you have to integrate your Azure portal with DevOps? I would say if you are doing a build and release, my question is that where are we releasing the code? Web apps. Where is the web app? Azure portal. So you have to integrate it any which ways. Again, so your release can be not only on Azure, you can use Azure DevOps to probably release a code on AWS server or an on-premise server or an Azure server and etc. Again, when you create an account with Microsoft out here, you normally when you go ahead and let's say to portal.azure.com, you get a tenant by default. If I just go ahead take this account and register with portal.azure.com, I get a tenant. I can use a tenant to raise a ticket and then let's say use the services out here. So it doesn't have to be integrated, but it's good to let's say have an integration. It's good to let's say have an integration to make the full benefit or to take the full benefit of let's say Azure DevOps. Yes, any more questions here? Okay, and one very important thing that I want you all to do is that there is something called as a form fill up that you have to do out here. I'll give you the link. Let's see, Azure DevOps parallelism request, if I'm not wrong. Just give me a minute. I'll just go and give the link out here for you all. Let's see, where is the request out here? Submit a request. All right. So I'll just post this link on the chat. This is forms.office.com. It's a form online that you get out here. Please do it today, as in when you create an organization. Don't do anything. This is the first thing that you need to do. Go ahead, give what is your name. In my case, my name is Kiran. What is your email address? Email address that is registered with Azure DevOps. Kiran something like this at the rate outlook.com. Then what is the name of your organization? Sample organization, but please give the full name out here. dev.azure.com / sample organization 007. So that's the reason they're telling example my organization or dev.azure.com / the name of your organization. Is it here? It's telling, are you requesting for a parallelism increase for private or public project? I have only a private project. I'll say private. Submit this up. Please submit it out. We'll talk about why do we need to submit this out. There is something called parallelism request that you need to start with build and releases. It will take around 2 to 3 days for this parallelism request to be fulfilled. So if you raise it today, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, by end of Friday, you should get an email from Microsoft telling that the parallelism request has been granted and etc. And it will again take us like about 2 or 3 days to complete, let's say, Azure repository, Git and all that stuff. Until then, you do not even need this. But if you raise it today, by the time we start with build release pipelines, you will have it and you can start using build and release out there. So the reason being, again, before COVID, again, Azure did not put all these restrictions. but after that the product has grown a lot. A lot of people are actually using these services, so they don't want to, let's say, give free services away. So until and unless you go ahead and request for free service, again, if to request this particular free service, just fill up this particular form. You don't need any credit card, nothing, no information at all. Just fill up this form and that should be good enough, right? Yes, any questions till here? Anyone, any questions till here?
For private,
Anyone,
do you
any
need
questions?
like for public, do you need another request?
For a public, no, because we are not really looking at a public project right now. So just go and do it for a private. Should be good enough. If you
Okay.
also want to go ahead and do it for a public, you're free. You can feel free to go for it. Private, mandatory. You have to go ahead and do it private. For, let's say, for private, do it mandatorily. For public, I would say it's still optional. For every organization, sorry. Yes. For every organization, you'll have to give that particular support request. This is unique per an organization. But you don't really create multiple organizations. One organization is good enough. But you can create multiple projects inside an organization. Do you have to do parallelism request for every project? No. Just do once, and that's good enough. It will be applied to every, let's say, project that is there inside this particular portal out here as such. Yes. Any questions till here? All right. So I'll just close this out. And I'll just go into my own organization, which is dev.azure.com DevOps classes 1992. This is the organization that I do have. And again, if you see on the left hand side, right, I am a part of not only my organization, but 13 or 14 more organizations out here. A reason being, these are all previous batch of students. When they get a doubt, they add me to the organization so that I can go and resolve them out. So you all can use this particular service out here. Again, this is the main organization that I have good amount of access on. And here I have multiple projects. If you see, I have, let's say, multiple projects that I've been working on. So for this class, I'll go ahead and create one more project. I'll say DevOps learning, say 8 a.m. something like this. DevOps learning 8 or something like that. I'll say this is a private project, and I'll say create this out here. So now it's telling a project is being created right now. It will take a minute for the project to be created, and now I am inside this particular project called DevOps learning 8. Again, here it is dev.azure.com / my name of the organization, which is, let's say, DevOps classes 1992 / the name of the project. So now you have also your project name appended out here. I don't need to do any kind of parallelism request. I've already done for this one. So I'm using the same thing out here as such. Again, in this particular, let's say, project, in the left hand side, you have all these things called repositories, pipelines, and everything. And the intention here is to get started with something called as repositories out here. Repositories. The very first question, why do we even need repositories? Why do you all even think that we need repositories out here as such? To store code. What is wrong in storing my code in local machine then? Make it available for others. But I can send emails to others telling that, okay, fine, this is my code. I can go ahead send across emails. Then what is the incentive of storing it inside a repository? Sorry? Uh, Yes, single time storage and all that stuff. One thing that I want to tell here is that repositories are also called as SCM, source control management, or VC, version control. Very, very, very important. As in, the purpose of repository is not only to store your code, but do something called as a version control mechanism. What does a version control mechanism really mean is very simple. Let's draw a very quick difference between the repository and our local file storage system. So in, let's say, this is, let's say, the repository source controls and etc. And in the right, I'll put something like local file storage out here as such. I'll say file storage local. Let's say I have a notepad file in the local system. I'll open up, let's say, my downloads. I'll put some notepad file out here. I'll say this is a sample file. I'll save this out. I'll save this out in downloads. I'll say sample file, sample text. I'll save this out in my local system out here. Very firstly, if I have to share this file to someone, I'll have to give them the access to this file directly from my Windows machine, or I'll have to share it over an email. One thing that I have to do. Let's do one more thing. I'll come inside the sample text. I'll add that this is line 2. I'll close this out. Now I'm adding line 2, then later I'll come add line 3, 4, 5, 6. There'll be thousands of lines out here. I shared this file to you as well over an email. You are also adding your own lines. My organization is telling me, give me one file that is the correct one. You will argue your file is correct. I will argue my file is correct. Whose file is now correct? You cannot never say, because everyone is making their own changes out here. Because you have a copy of your own file, I have a copy of my own file. So there is no collaboration at all. That is what happens if you don't have a file in a central place. So I'm now telling, let's place the file not in the local system, because in the local system, multiple people can be having multiple copies of their files. You will never know which copy is the right one. But in a version control mechanism, there is only one copy of the file, which is the correct one. So if you have to, let's say, share this particular file, you just say, okay, fine, go to Azure repositories. There you have the file. That is the right one out here. Second advantage of this is this. In this case, I'm maintaining multiple copies. Let's say one of the developer has a full copy of the file in the local system. The other developers do not have the full copy of the file. They're still working. They're, let's say, depend upon this particular developer, developer 3, to, let's say, see all the full copy of the full copy of the file and so on and so forth. What if this developer leaves the organization? Or what if this particular developer's machines or this particular developer machine all of a sudden crashes? You can have machine crash, right? You cannot really control it. If the machine crashes, what if there is data loss? Right? In that case, it is very dangerous, because I have to again work on the full version. I'll have to write my code. I'll have to, let's say, do a lot of development. I've already done 1 month of development. I don't want to lose it. In that case, answer here is version control once again. This full copy of your file here, so that other developers who are a part of your DevOps organization can go ahead, download that particular file, so that even if the system crashes, I don't really have to worry where my full copy is. One thing out here, very, very important, is this is storage. Till now, I'm just talking about storage. One of the biggest advantages is storage, how you can store, securely store, and all that stuff.